Well, welcome everyone to the Earth Care Congregation's webinar that is put on by Presbyterians for Earth Care. And if you would please, I should repost this for you all. If you would type in the chat the name of your church, the location, and if you are an Earth Care congregation, an Earth Care congregation wannabe, or if you are just here for more information. So what I thought I would do is start with some ancient history of Earth Care congregations. I think this all started in the mid 2000s, not like 2050, but like, 2005. And I'm Jane Laping. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself, and I'm filling in for Bruce Gillette tonight. And a friend of mine was a Unitarian, and she knew my interest in environmental stuff, and she gave me a book that the Unitarians have put out. That's actually a program called Green Sanctuary, and it was all about things that Unitarian, I know they're not churches, but I don't know what to call them, Unitarians could do for their congregations that would, make them closer to the Spirit. So I read it and I thought, this is so cool. I thought Presbyterians should have something like this. And so sometimes I just get motivated. Nobody told me to do it or anything, but I just wrote up this program and I based it on the 1990 policy, Restoring Creation for Ecology and Justice. So I was living in Houston at the time. I was a Restoring Creation enabler, and I was like getting no support at all from my church. Big surprise, this is 2005. But Presbyterians for Earth Care was having their conference in Texas at, I remember the name of the place now. Mo Ranch. Some of you may have even been there. So I went to Mo Ranch with what I was calling Restoring Creation congregations, trying to drum up some interest. And I met this, I think he was a seminarian at the time, Alan Jenkins. And he says, we should take this to the Presbyterian Church. He said, I know someone and I'm gonna give it to her. So that person was, name again, sorry, Katie Holmes, and she was with the environmental ministries of PCUSA at the time. And two really remarkable people, Alan and Katie, got that thing going by 2000, I don't remember, 7 was it? Or before then, we had a pilot going of 10 churches just to test it out, see how it would work. And then it was initiated in 2010. So I guess maybe it was later than 2007 when that happened. But anyway, I thought it was a rather interesting story. And yeah, as Jessica had just mentioned, there are now 290 Earth Care congregations. So that says a lot about how interested people are in doing things in their church to care for God's creation. So I think what I should do now is get us started with a prayer. It's always good to have God in our midst. Creator God, you have given us such a wonderful place to live, yet we as a species have defiled it with our greed and our desire for convenience. Be with us tonight, this evening, as we learn about what we can do in our churches to be better stewards, Lord, that you will give us grace and help us to protect your sacred earth. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. All right, so the way this is going to work, so if everyone would please put themselves on mute unless they're speaking. The way this will work is that Jessica Maudlin from the Presbyterian Hunger Program will start. And then maybe I should introduce you first, Jessica. Let me do that. So Jessica Maudlin, wave your hand, please. Is with the Presbyterian Hunger Program. She is the Associate for Sustainable Living and Earth Care Concerns. And she provides resources to Presbyterians as they address issues of faith, lifestyle choices, and sustainability. And in addition, she also manages the Earth Care Congregation and Hunger Action Advocate networks. So Jessica is the person who approves your Earth Care Congregation applications every year and your recertification. So Jessica is a really good person to know because she does not mind answering questions either. So Jessica will be our first speaker, and she will be followed by Carol Dunn, who is a prime example of an Earth Care congregation. She is an elder at Scottsburg Presbyterian Church in Indiana, and she helped start the Earth Care team in 2017, and she's led the team since then. She also helped initiate and nurture a nonprofit called Great Scott Trees, and partnered to lead a school-based environmental education program called Tree Keepers. Carol is an active member of the Southern Indiana chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. So we'll hear from Carol second, and then Jessica will come back and tell us about resources that she has available for what you can do in your congregation. So Jessica, I believe we are ready for you.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen with you all. Thank you for your patience in letting me get there. Okay, so just checking in that you can see my slides and still hear me. Yeah. So like Jane said, I am the Associate for Sustainable Living and Earth Care Concerns. Katie Holmes, who Jane mentioned, was my two people before me doing this work. Rebecca Barnes was the person that did it just before me. So some of you may know her. She's currently the coordinator of the Hunger Program. And I just want to start by making a quick note of why some of you might, when she said that that's the program that I'm with, might have wondered why Earth Care is now part of the Hunger Program. And in about 2015, during some rearranging of program areas and looking at budgets, one of the things that we realized was that so much of our work was intersecting with environmental and climate issues. And so it made a lot of sense, since we were already kind of working with that ministry area, and it was just the one person for her to move to our office so that we could do a better job of coordinating that work. So the Hunger Program priorities are broken down kind of into these three big areas of focus. And so that includes more and better food. It also includes work that allows us to stand in solidarity with people. So workers' justice, making sure that people have access to the land that they need, making sure they have access to the economic training they need to be able to make sure they are being compensated fairly, and that kind of thing. And the final priority area is this helping create more livable environments. So whether that's organizations doing climate work, or if it's folks working on pollution issues in their area, whatever that might look like. And so that is where my work that we currently call Sustainable Living and Earth Care Concerns, but is Environmental Ministries, falls. And that is where the Earth Care Congregation Certification Program is. So when I have this conversation with folks, depending on where they are in the spectrum, we try to start with, or I've often heard the question, why should my church care about the earth? And I think that this is a crowd that maybe that's not your first question because you were here. So clearly you have reasons for yourself. And we start with scripture, right? So we know that our original vocation as people of faith is that God put Adam in the garden to till and to keep it. And we still today have that same responsibility to care for the earth and all that is a part of it. It's also, if you are a church or a presbytery that has decided to take on this Matthew 25 vision that the denomination has embraced, doing climate justice and environmental justice is a big piece of that. We know that Matthew 25 calls us to actively take part in addressing the issues in the world around us. And so by doing this climate and climate justice work, it's one of the ways that churches can participate in that Matthew 25 initiative. Some of you may know at General Assembly this year, gender justice, militarism, and climate change were added as intersectional issues to the existing racism, poverty, and vital congregations part of Matthew 25. And so we had already been doing this work, but it was good to see that acknowledged as part of the work plan this summer at General Assembly. The other reason that we as a denomination care about the earth is because we have all of this great, rich policy as Presbyterians that calls us to do that. You heard Jane mention the Restoring Creation for Ecology and Justice policy, some of the other things. There's a guide to going neutral. There's policy around carbon pricing, carbon tax, carbon dividend. We also have policy around environmental racism and promoting environmental justice. And all of these things really give us a well-rounded basis for doing the work of caring for God's creation. Like Jane mentioned, in 2009 was the first year of those 10 pilot churches. 2010, that General Assembly reaffirmed a portion of the restoring creation policy that we mentioned. And that was, they reaffirmed a piece specifically that called churches to ground the life and the work of the church in this undertaking of caring for the earth and restoring creation, and acknowledging that that's not a short-term thing that we can be committed to, that really has to be a part of the life of the church. And so some of the language from that is where the Earth Care Pledge and kind of the heart of the certification came from. And I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But this year, there were officially 290 churches certified. We have churches in 41 out of the 50 states, including a church in Hawaii and a church in Alaska. I think there are 2 in Alaska. One of the things that I've worked really hard to get done this year is to get the certification application and guide translated into Spanish to make that more available to some of our Latinx congregations. And in 2023, we'll certify our first international Earth Care congregation. There is a church in Chile that I've been working with. So really excited to see the way that this program has grown even through COVID. And one thing I wanted to mention just related to the policy that is available, if you were tracking things from General Assembly this year, one of the folks from the Presbyterians for Carbon Dividends group has put out a great, she just shared it with me today, a great PowerPoint and facilitator notes to be able to talk about the most current policy things that came from GA. And I'll put a link in the chat to that while Carol is sharing. But so we have great resources to be able to talk about some of this policy that I just mentioned. So that's something that can be a resource for churches as you are building and developing your green team. So the kind of 1, 2, 3 of how does your church become an Earth Care congregation? The first step is it starts with forming an Earth Care team. You'll hear about Carol and FPC Scottsburg's experience of that. Your Earth Care team might be 1 or 2 people. It might be the whole congregation. So it can look like what works best in your context. The second step is for that team then to complete what we call the environmental audit. The audit and the application are basically the same thing. We just use the audit language so that you can see, if you're just doing this cold from what you're already doing, here it gives you an idea of where you stand as far as what you would need to do to earn your certification. The first year that you're certified, you have to earn 100 points total, 25 points in each of the 4 categories that are named on the application. Those 4 categories are worship, education, facilities, and outreach. And those categories come from the Earth Care Pledge, which comes into play in the third step, which is approaching your session to get approval of the Earth Care Pledge. So, this is something that it really is something we hope is part of the life of the whole congregation and not something just a small piece is working on. Some churches choose to, they might approach their session before they do the audit, depending just how your church works. Some folks like to get the session likes to be involved a little sooner. So those steps are interchangeable depending on what works best for you. And then the last step is to apply to be an Earth Care congregation. And if you haven't seen it already, pcusa.org/earthcare congregations has resources, a little bit of history, a map, and a listing so you can see local churches that are already certified in your area. The Guide to Grading Presbyterian Churches is also there, and the spreadsheets that you can use for planning are also online there. The application period is January 1st to February 15th of each year. And like Jane mentioned, I'm the person that gets to approve your applications, which means I'm also the person that gets to read them. And so it takes me a bit to get through everyone's application. So usually by the first week of March or the middle of March, we have notification of your approval and letters and press releases and certificates out to your churches acknowledging your certification. To talk a little bit more about the Earth Care Pledge, like I mentioned, all of the churches that are certified have committed themselves to this 4-part pledge that it's related to specific steps in each of those 4 categories that I mentioned. And it also just affirms that we know that the earth and all of creation belongs to God, that we acknowledge that that God calls us to be stewards of the earth that we've been given. And also it acknowledges that we know that caring for the earth means caring for all of God's people. And so we can only really have environmental justice when there's justice for all that we share this planet with. So what does that pledge look like? So the things that are named specifically in those categories are that our worship and discipleship will celebrate God's glory. It says that our education will encourage and support each other as we keep and work to heal creation. It talks about how we'll manage our facilities, that we'll make sure that they are managed and maintained and upgraded in a way that is cherishing and respectful of creation. And it also talks about that our outreach will encourage involvement in the community and involvement in public policy that strives to protect and restore the earth that we all share as a common home. It looks like one of my slides got hidden. If you give me just a second. This is the one that I would like to show. What is the Earth Care audit? I just wanted to give you a sample of what the spreadsheet, I put a link in the chat earlier so that you can download the spreadsheet that we offer to folks. That spreadsheet is available for planning, so you can see all of the questions. And then during the application period, those answers have to be entered into an online application. But to give you a little bit of a sense of what the application looks like. It is at first glance quite overwhelming because I think it's something like 198 questions. And so sometimes people take a glance at it and just shut down. But what I will say is that, not every question may pertain to your congregation. So you can only answer the questions that pertain to you. But we have left it this comprehensive because we find that churches that have gone through the process to do this use it as a tool. So if you're looking for what can we do in the future, that kind of thing, there are suggestions there. So if you're not already doing sermons on earth care, for example, that's something that you can add. If you're not already, planting a tree or a shrub when you do baptisms, that's something that could be done. The way that the point totals are counted is that the numbers across the top here are the number of times that an action has been done. And then the questions, as you answer those, that tells you how many points that you get for that question. So for example, if you have 2 Sundays in a year devoted to earth care, you would get 10 points for that action. If you have those 2 Sundays devoted to earth care, and then you also have, 5 trees that you planted for new members. So you look at the question, we planted 5 trees, you get 10 points for that. So that's 20 points just with those 2 questions that you have. So I can talk a little bit more about this, but I'm going to stop sharing. And normally at this point in a presentation, I have some photos and stories from the Earth Care congregations have sent me, but I'm really thankful that we have Carol on the call with us, and she is going to share about their church's experience becoming certified. So we'll give it to Carol for a bit. Oh, you're muted still.
I guess you need to hear me, don't you? I really appreciate your asking me. I think you asked me because you know how high I am on Earth Care congregations, and also how much fun that we have doing Earth Care congregation stuff. So I want to start. Let me get my well, let's see here. Hold on just a second. Find my cursor. I'm going to share screen here. I want to talk a little bit about, can you see my screen? Everybody okay with that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to share a little bit about who we are. We are a very small church. We're a 125-year-old church also. The building's not quite that old. It's been built in segments. There's no part of the building that's newer than 75 years. So it's an old building. We are surrounded by a small town. We're in a community of 5,000. It's a rural community. We're about 30 miles from Louisville. And also, the trend in our church, I think, has been fairly typical, especially of small churches in our denomination over recent years. As we are growing smaller in numbers of our congregants, we're also growing older in age. This year we had just over 40 active members. So we are a tiny little church. While we have been small, we have also been pretty active in outreach in our community. We've been working with other groups and churches, addressing poverty, hunger issues, homelessness, addiction, recovery issues, that kind of thing. But what we had not done prior to getting involved with Earth Care congregations is we really had not focused on Earth Care. It's not that we had ignored it, we just had never been a focus of our church. Our Earth Care congregations story started in 2016. We had a wake-up call that year. We realized that we weren't going to be able to count on our government to effectively address climate change if we ever could. But it was really a wake-up call in 2016 that we were not going to be able to count on our government. And so we decided to get busy on this. For me personally, the need to address climate change really rose to the top of my priority list of things that I really felt strongly God was calling me to get involved in. So I started by educating myself on the causes of climate change, what caused the crisis that we're in, what is being done about it, what groups are out there working on it. And I started getting involved in some environmental groups. I also started talking to some of my friends and other congregants and my pastor. And there was some interest there, in getting more active. I'm embarrassed to say that I had heard about Earth Care congregations, but I didn't know anything about it until 2016, actually. And it was exciting to know that my denomination had such a commitment to Earth Care and was so supportive to congregations to get involved in Earth Care. So the next step for us, and this may be true for your church too, we don't ever undertake any new ministry without studying it first. I think that's what we Presbyterians do. We study stuff. So we decided to organize an adult Earth Care class. And we had about 15 people. This would have been in the summer of 2017. It's a 7-week study. We had about 15 people that religiously attended the 7-week course. We had over half of our session members attended, which was really important and really exciting. And at the end of this course, we chose Christian Simplicity. It was a program I was familiar with through another organization, through the Earth and Spirit Center in Louisville. And Jessica had copies of it. So we were able to order the copies from her and got started with this program, which was wonderful. One of the really good things about it, and I would recommend any program you start with that's an adult education study on Earth Care, make sure that it's steeped in biblical reasons for caring for the earth. It's really important, I think, when we're getting started, especially for those folks that aren't real sure about, well, what's this got to do with what our church should be doing, is really establishing a firm biblical basis for Earth Care. And this study did that. I do think that this is a difficult to find study. I'm not sure. Jessica said she thought she might be able to put her hands on it. I would definitely recommend it, but if you can't find it, another one that I would recommend that I am very familiar with is Inhabiting Eden. It is actually written by a friend of mine, Tricia Tull, who some of you may know. Tricia is a retired professor of Old Testament from Louisville Seminary, and she focused the latter part of her career and also her retirement really on Earth Care, and is really become quite an authority in the area. And this is another wonderful study, firmly establishing the biblical basis for Earth Care. And if you are interested at all in this, you might want to take a screenshot of this page so that you'll know how to get a hold of it. I also know that Jessica has other resources that would be easily attainable for you if you want to do a study. After our team, I didn't tell you, the study that we did was so inspiring and so good that we had 5 people from the participants in that study who just offered to be on an Earth Care team. It was kind of like a miracle. It was wonderful. And I volunteered to chair the team. So after the team was formed, we contacted Jessica. We had some conversations with her. In fact, we met her for lunch. We're 30 miles from Louisville in the center, so it was pretty easy to actually make physical contact with Jessica, which was wonderful. Also, she visited our church, spoke from the pulpit, both delivered the sermon on Earth Care and also talked to the congregation about what Earth Care Congregations is and what it does, and just kind of gave a pep talk to our congregation. And I know she's available, not necessarily to be in person, but I know with Zoom, she's available to be able to do that kind of thing for other churches if they would like that. So after our study and after researching the logistics on how an Earth Care congregation works, we were ready to approach our session. And I have to say that because most of our session members had attended our study, our session unanimously approved our going ahead and applying for Earth Care congregation status. That was in late 2017. So what the really exciting thing was that for the first time in our our church's 125-year history, we would be actually prioritizing the ministry of Earth Care. So, and we were all set and ready to go. So, of course, then we ran into the Earth Care congregations application. And as Jessica said, it looks intimidating. It actually looks more intimidating than it actually is. I do have to admit, the very first one that we completed, the audit, was actually the most challenging that we have done. We did work for quite a few hours on that audit. The other thing is, when we started out, we were not at all sure that our small church, poorly resourced church, who had not really focused on Earth Care before this, would be able to find the 25 points in each of the areas of the life of the church that's required in the 100 points total. We just really kind of scratched our heads and thought, oh, I don't know about this, So, but one nice thing for our church, the 4 areas that are looked at mirrored exactly how our ministry teams are divided in our church. So that made it fairly easy to make a decision about how to do the audit. What we did is, as the team leader, I worked with the session member who led each of the teams: worship, education, facilities, and outreach. So I had 4 session members that I worked with in each of their areas to actually complete the audit together. So it wasn't a lot of burden on anyone other than myself, and it wasn't a huge burden for me. I kind of enjoyed it. What was really cool about it was that, just as Jessica said, not only did we find out what we're already doing, and sometimes we were really surprised to find out some of the things that we were doing, but we found out some easy things that would be next steps for our church. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In doing the audit, we realized that we had not changed any of our lighting. We were all incandescent and fluorescent lighting. We had not changed anything to LED. So, we made a mental note. That's something that would be fairly easy to get to change over. The other thing we found out is, when we were looking in our kitchens, we found out that we had a service for 100 place settings of stoneware and silverware that we hadn't used for years. We had gone to what many people had gone to, what's easy: paper and plastic for all of our meals. So we were thrilled to know that we had all of these dishes available that would be easy to transition to and get rid of the paper and the plasticware. So it was an education process for us that first year, particularly. And it was an important way to get started. And the other thing that was important was having the session members involved in doing it also informed them about improvements that we could make in the area of the church that they were responsible for. So it was an easy way to be able to set goals and have session approval for our goals. Well, we needn't have worried about making the grade. We found that we had many more than the 25 points required in each of the 4 areas. In fact, we were shocked to find out that we actually totaled 188 points that first year. I mean, honestly, we were shocked that we were that far ahead of the 100 points that were required. So I think that exemplifies what Jessica said to begin with. The audit is not meant to screen churches out of this program. It is really meant as a tool. It's meant to help churches be able to have a path to follow and continuing to transition to even better Earth Care practices. Also, we have now, we've completed 5 audits and applications and reapplications for Earth Care status. And while that first year was a bear, I have to say that each year it's gotten easier. And this last year, I actually looked forward to, and I think our session members did too, looked forward to doing the application. It's so much easier. We probably spent 2 hours on the application for this year. And I couldn't tell you how many hours we spent on the first one. So it's really, it really has become very routine and doesn't require a lot of effort. The other thing I wanted to talk about is how the Earth Care ministry has become embedded in our church. And as you can see the list on the left here, we decided, and this is something each church can decide on their own how you embed it. But we decided, as leader of the Earth Care team, I served on the outreach team already. And so we decided to put the Earth Care team under the outreach team, just for better communication more than anything else. We kept the Earth Care team separate from the outreach team. We had the Earth Care annual goals were defined by the Earth Care team. The Earth Care budget is defined within the overall budget for outreach, but it's in a separate account so that we actually have money designated for Earth Care ministry, separate from outreach, but it's within the outreach budget. And our accomplishments every year are listed in our church annual report, and it's listed under outreach, but it's labeled Earth Care. So this would differ for every church, but it's what kind of made sense for us. And I think that, for your church, if you decide to become an Earth Care congregation, you would just look to see what would make sense for your church. Okay, now I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about sort of how the Earth Care ministries have changed in our church. The first year, we decided to start, and I think this is kind of a good idea, to start easy. We started, what I call the low pickings, the easy things, recycling, as I said, committing to using only reusable tableware. In fact, we were really pleasantly surprised. We have 8 or 10 different groups that use our church. And so not only did we commit to that, but we let them know. We didn't mandate anybody to go to using our reusable dishes, but we let all of our groups know what we were doing, and that, we were really focusing on taking care of the earth and reducing waste and that kind of thing. And every single group just jumped on using the dishes and getting away from disposable dishware. So it was really a wonderful surprise for us that we were able to transition really pretty easily. And one of the things that we did was start a film series on Earth Care, which was really easy in our church because we love movies anyway. So it wasn't that hard just to make sure the movies became Earth Care themed movies. And they were really, really very popular that first year. The next year we realized that one area that our church had not been involved with very much was advocacy. And in doing our research, we found out, in getting more involved environmentally, we found out that in 2018, our GA, as Jessica said, decided to endorse a federal policy that would result, if passed, in big pivoting to reduce carbon emissions, and that would be a carbon tax. And when we found that out, we thought, our session needs to know that, because the denomination was really encouraging churches to endorse this approach. So we did approach our session, and they listened very respectfully and basically told us they just didn't know enough. They didn't know enough about public advocacy and the session's role in public advocacy, and they didn't know enough about carbon tax. So we made up our mind the next year to get started on that. So you can see some other goals that we put in place that year, but we really got started on training our congregation. We found a fella, Bill Bray. Some of you may know Bill, out of Texas, who was very involved in the endorsement that the GA made in 2018. And he had a 1-hour little webinar that he did. So we had Bill do a webinar for our session and part of our congregation, and actually some other Presbyterians in our area. It was very good. And really established clearly why a carbon tax is important and why our denomination had endorsed a carbon tax. But it wasn't really until the next year that we really started moving on advocacy, among some other things that you see there. One of the things that our church did was support the creation of a small group, Presbyterian Climate Advocates, who together, I was a member of that. There are 4 of us that created actually a Sunday school, a 4-session Sunday school, to on faith in the climate crisis, to really educate our fellow Presbyterians about the climate crisis, about how to reduce our own personal and congregational footprints, and also the need to get involved with advocacy so that big changes can be made that really are necessary. So that started happening, and many of our session members in our congregation attended that program. So by the end of that year, 2021, last year, our session voted to endorse the carbon tax policy that our denomination advocates. And our church went on the list of the faith-based endorsers on the Citizens Climate Lobby website. Now, that was a big step for our church. We had never done any kind of public advocacy in that way before. So anyway, something that we're kind of proud of. So then for this year, we decided we would carry our advocacy even further. We've been advocating to other Presbyterians. We've been advocating for federal policy change, but we really hadn't done a lot of advocacy within our own local community. So we decided to get started here. And so this year, you can see some things that we did. We partnered with our local United Methodist Church, who were they had not focused on earth care themselves, but they were ready to start getting started on that. And so we started a film series just between the two congregations. And then we partnered with them to create an event, a public event here in Scottsburg in September, a Drive Electric Scott County event, which was just a lot of fun. We found 5 electric vehicle owners who brought their vehicles to our farmers market on a Saturday morning, and some electric bikes. And we advertised it ahead of time and found some sponsorship and invited the public to come in to learn about electric cars and how important they are, how affordable they are, and how important they are going to be in reducing our carbon footprint in our country. And it was just a really, really fun event. And it was also a way to witness to our community about the need to care for the earth, the need to reduce carbon emissions, and also that faith-based people can and should be involved in the process. So our goal for next year, main goal, is to continue the partnership with our Methodist friends, and we're hoping to develop a local community earth care project. We're thinking possibly a community composting program. We're not sure yet. We're just at the beginning of thinking about that. But anyway, we've really evolved from the low-hanging fruit to actually getting involved in serious advocacy, which has just been all kinds of fun. So I wanted to finish by just telling you the advantages that we see in our congregation with becoming an earth care congregation. And that's over and above all of the resources and guidance that Jessica brings from her office to any congregation that becomes an earth care congregation. But one of the things for us is that it has just brought vital focus to earth care in the whole life of the church. There are very few decisions that we make in our church these days that we don't at least consider the earth care ramifications of the decision. So it really has become, after 5 years, really, really embedded in every aspect of our congregation. It has afforded us a dedicated team, dedicated energy, and dedicated resources to be able to further our earth care in our congregation. And then there's the annual accountability. So you do the audit every year, and part of the application is looking forward to the next year and deciding what you want to highlight in terms of goal for the next year. So that strategic planning part of this program, I think, is really good, and it's brought some structure to our earth care efforts. And then Jessica mentioned the Earth Care Pledge, and for me, that's one of the most important things about being an earth care congregation. In our church, we have now established a tradition that on Earth Day Sunday every year, we print the Earth Care Pledge in the bulletin, and we have our whole congregation recite the Earth Care Pledge together, reminding all of us as individuals and as a corporate group how vital it is to care for our earth and help restore creation that God has asked us to do. So as you can see, I'm really high on earth care congregations, and I am going to stop share here. And Jessica, I don't know if you want to invite questions at this point, or do you have some more things you want to talk about before we? Questions?
I think I would like to take just 2 minutes and share my screen again. Thank you so much for doing such a thorough job. I love the story of your church, and that is the goal, right? That this program will help congregations move from first steps to the great things you're doing in your community. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. One of the things that I've put a couple of links in the chat. This last document that I've shared is across the denomination, both grassroots folks and offices within the Presbyterian Mission Agency. There are different groups you can connect with. So I've put that document in the chat so that you can have it for reference. But my office also offers things like there's a Lent study based on the Christian simplicity that I put a link to that, and you can order hard copies by reaching out to us. Also, things like we offer a climate care challenge if you're a church that's looking to get started, but maybe you're not ready to jump into full certification. That is a great thing that you can do as a Sunday school class. Also things like if your church, maybe you want to get started with just having a green checklist for your meetings, or if you want to develop a green meeting policy for your building, I can help. I have a place to get started with that, and I can help you think through for your church what you would need to add to that. We also have a great partnership with a group called Blessed Tomorrow, and one of the things that they offer are great tools for helping develop messaging as a faith leader about why environmental and climate change issues are important and something we should be talking about. They also, not all churches start with climate change as a talking point for the first year, depending on where your congregation is located and opinions of folks in the church. But those tools are really great for helping make that transition from recycling to more advocacy-based things. So I think now I just want to make sure I leave time for questions, because I'm sure folks probably have some questions for Carol, at least since she's been through this process. But I'll turn it back over to Jane and Mindy to kind of help facilitate how you want to do the question and answer part.
Mindy, can you take care of that? I don't quite know.
Sure.
Yeah.
One way we can handle this is if you are able to raise your hand, that will pull you up to the top row here, and we can make sure we recognize you. So down at the bottom of your screen, go down and click on reactions, and you can raise your hand. If you can't find that, then just wave your hand, and we'll do our best to call on you, and you can unmute yourself at that point. And also, I wanted to mention everything that's been mentioned tonight. I know there's been a lot shared in the chat. This video is being recorded, and also I will put that on our website to share probably the beginning of next week. I will also pull all the resources from the chat for you, the links to the different things. And I will have a bullet point list next to the YouTube recording on our website. So don't be panicked about catching all those tonight. You could always go back and access those from our website. And I'll let you know once all of that is ready. That's kind of part of what I handle after the webinar. So questions, anybody?
I've seen in the chat a couple of people have asked about copies of the presentation. Okay. I've put a SharePoint link into the chat. I'm not sure that everybody will be able to open that, but if you can't, I will send a copy of it to Mindy that she can share with you.
Absolutely.
Jessica, this is Jane. I have a question, even though I can't figure out how to raise my hand today. So could you talk more about, I think it's after 5 years, after a congregation is certified for 5 years, that they can, instead of doing the audit, they can do a narrative for their application.
And so that actually ties into the question I see that Cindy just asked too. So for the first year and the first 5 years, the renewal, like, so what we call the application and the audit is the same thing. It's the same set of questions. We talk about it as the audit before folks have certified to prepare, but then the yearly renewal and the first year application is that same set of questions. We ask that churches do that for 5 years because it helps them be able to track, like Carol just shared, that process and that evolution. After you've been certified for 5 years, we accept just a narrative report. And that could be, for example, if you have to do something in writing that you present to your session, you can just upload that document to apply after you've been certified for 5 years. Or if, for example, you have a newsletter that you've written something like pretty comprehensive about activities, or even some churches that have, focused on one activity that kind of folds in all of those different pieces. So we're happy to receive a narrative version instead. For some churches, that's easier. Some churches like to continue to do the audit, and that's also acceptable. We are just getting into the territory of having churches that have been certified for more than 10 years, which is great. Some of those churches have said, this is really a part of the life of our church. We really value doing this, but they just feel like maybe they don't want to send us things. And those churches have the option of just saying, yes, we want to continue to be counted. But even though a lot of those churches are still sending me narrative reports, which we like, but we are a little bit living into what does longevity of this look like ourselves. And so some of that might change, but that is our best, how we are managing that right now.
All right, I saw a hand up, Claudia. If you want to unmute.
I'm finding this really inspiring, and thank you so much for your time on this. And I just recently heard from another couple churches talk about their process. And one church happened to mention that they, not everybody in the church bought into this. So Carol, I hear you saying that you really did a study, involved session, and there was a lot of buy-in. Yeah. But so one team felt that they were the environmental police at their church, and it sounded like a negative relationship. So any tips on how to avoid coming across that way? And maybe Carol, your outline is the way, but I don't know if you've heard about how those interested can make sure it comes across in a life-giving way, as opposed to, we're policing people.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of trouble in my church with that. I think for a couple of reasons. We're small, and we're really close because we're small. We did have actually probably one session member that first year, 2016, who voted against, I guess it was 2017, against the Earth Care, going for the Earth Care congregation. He didn't vote. I take that back. He didn't vote against it. He just talked against it. And he really never got to the point where he was really supportive. And he actually left the church. I don't know that it was because, we ended up embracing Earth Care congregations for sure. But, I think one of the things that helped us is our pastor really embraced it. And he already, even before we became an Earth Care congregation, he had already embraced, already had did a sermon series during Earth Day month during April. The times that he was gone and had a guest pastor, often it would be someone who would be coming in, a guest pastor to come in and preach, not necessarily specifically an Earth Care overtly, explicitly an Earth Care message, but often there were Earth Care messages within those messages. So our congregation already was hearing a lot out of the pulpit. And I think that's really important to hear from the pulpit again, the biblical basis for caring for God's creation. And I think the more we talk in those words and the more we hear from the pulpit, the less pushback you tend to get from people, because it's so biblical. And we don't, if we haven't been exposed to that before, we don't know that. I think that's where some people come from. I know it's such it just is a shame that particularly where it concerns climate, that has become so politicized, and it's become part of our political divide, really. Unfortunately, it's a very unfortunate thing. And I think maybe that's a problem in some. So if the climate change thing is a problem, I would just go really slow with that. I wouldn't put that first on my agenda. I would put that way down the road as a long-term goal, to be working to address climate change, and maybe start with easier things like planting native plants and changing light bulbs and things that most people aren't going to disagree with, particularly if you can show how it's going to be helpful to the church, if it's going to save a little money or whatever. But I do think establishing that biblical basis is just really important. And I wanted to mention, and I don't have the website, but you can Google Eco Preacher. It's a kind of a new effort by Leah Shade, who is a professor at Lexington Theological Seminary. And she's with a larger group. It's an ecumenical group, actually not, it's an interfaith group of people who are helping pastors and other religious leaders be able to find the courage to preach about earth care. And I know that in some churches, in some locations, that is an issue. There are pastors that tread lightly with that topic. And so Eco Preacher is really there to be the support system for pastors. So that may be something, I don't know that that's an issue in your church, but if there are any folks out here who feel like their pastor treads lightly because of possible pushback, Eco Preacher would be a wonderful resource for them. So just Google Eco Preacher. You can find the website and find the group that way.
And I actually put
Thank
the
you
link.
so much.
Uh-huh.
Oh, sorry. I put the link to the Eco
you.
Preacher blog there. And going along with that, there is a terrific book that we did a webinar with this author, but Wilson Dickinson, who is also out of Lexington, has a book called Green Good News. And it is I think it would be good for pastors, but it's also a good, if you're looking for a group read for a Sunday school. It's very well done. I realize I put so much into the chat, but I also shared a link to the Language of the Earth Care Pledge. And I think in addition to what Carol has shared, if your session looks at the language of that pledge, it's done in such a way that I think it's been a helpful tool for people to say, as people of faith, we believe in this stuff. Like when you look at what the language of what you're agreeing to is. And so it is something that I think when you start there, that is helpful too, because you're not signing up to become radical climate activists, although, there's a little bit of hope that some folks end up there, but that it is really.
You don't have to start there for sure.
How do we, and some churches can start there and it's great, but the pledge I think helps articulate what the goal of the program is in a way that's helpful.
And Manley, I see your hand is raised if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Sure. The point I was originally going to make, Carol just made in terms of getting the pastor involved. I think that's a very crucial kind of thing. I've been part of 2 Earth Care congregations, one a small to medium size and one a very large church. And in our presbytery, we've, tried to work with churches that are considering it and so forth. And it's helpful to have a cadre of people who can go around and help with adult education and sermons and so forth. And we were lucky to get a pastor who was on the pulpit supply list for the presbytery, who was very interested in earth care. And he sort of made it a point when he went around and filled a pulpit to stress earth care kind of thing. So they got an earth care thing in addition to their regular sermon that they expected. Also to have people who are similar in size, so that to have somebody from a 2,000 member church talking to somebody in a session that has 40 members, there's a certain amount of skepticism about it. So if you can find somebody who can match in terms of the kind of characteristics, whether you're talking about size or the location, whether they're a city church, whether they're a rural church or what have you, the kinds of things that can take away the barriers that people might originally have, so that they aren't attacking the messenger rather than dealing with the message.
Mhm. Yeah, good points. Yeah.
Judith has her hand waving. Judith, if you want to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah, I was just, hi, Carol. I've taken Carol's class and it's so wonderful. And I put in the chat how I love how she stays away from the politics. And I think that's the problem, you know, that we're having with our Green Committee. We're going along real swimmingly out here in California that, and had a whole plan for lighting approvals that our local utility was going to pay for, is going to pay for. And I think that's still on. It's taking its time. But what I would say is then we decided to try to do a climate change presentation and, you know, all heck broke loose. And what I would also say is, so I think we're learning and should have known. But I would say that Katharine Hayhoe, the evangelical climate scientist, look up Katharine Hay, Hayhoe, if you don't know her already. I have gotten some of the very conservative folks to look at some of her videos, and they're all going now, well, if we do it like Katharine says, or if we, or Katharine, I didn't hear Katharine going on and on about the science, but, you know, so I highly commend, you know, looking at.
You're right. She's tremendous. Yeah.
Using Katharine as a tool, you know, she's so winsome and funny and
Well, and she's an evangelical, that's her background. And she's really good at speaking to conservative evangelicals. And I mean, we have some folks, Presbyterians, are not what I don't know if they call themselves evangelicals, conservatives. And she knows how to talk to conservatives. She's just really good.
yeah, she's really good. So
Yeah,
anyway, if you need help, use her stuff.
Well, folks, we have reached our hour. It has been a very rich hour full of good information and good conversation. I want to thank all 34 of you for being on the call, and especially thanks to Jessica for her updated presentation. I love the new slides, Jessica, and also to Carol for being so inspiring and yeah, just know how to say it, but you're pretty wonderful.
Well, I was happy to help. So
Jane, before we get off, I just want to mention our next webinar, if I could, and that is going to be on Tuesday. Oh, I already